Nobody has killed Volcanikka yet. Here are 10 characters who could, ranked from least to most likely to actually finish the job. Let's break this down. Cecil Stedman. He has never thrown a punch at anyone or anything. He does not need to. The Cecil Stedman who ran the Global Defense Agency across multiple seasons of Invincible is the character the franchise uses to demonstrate that information, preparation, and access to the right technology at the right moment can compensate for the complete absence of personal physical capability. The man who kept the Scourge virus in reserve as a potential weapon against the Viltrumite population, a pathogen engineered from Viltrumite DNA that nearly wiped the entire species during its first deployment, understands that the solution to a biology-based threat is a biology-based countermeasure. Volcanikka is a magma elemental whose immortality is entirely dependent on the regenerative properties of her lava composition. Her physiology is specific and documentable. The Invincible fandom wiki confirms her biology is infernal demonic physiology drawing on flame and lava, a defined biological system rather than abstract supernatural invulnerability. Cecil's approach to the Viltrumite problem was to study their DNA and develop a weapon targeting their specific biological architecture. The same methodology applied to Volcanikka would begin with the same question. What does her composition require to maintain structural integrity? And what disrupts that requirement at the source? The answer is almost certainly thermal, extreme cold. Applied comprehensively enough to solidify all magma simultaneously before regeneration can compensate, would theoretically trap her in a state where reformation is impossible. Cecil cannot deliver that personally. He absolutely knows someone who could, and he would find a way to make the arrangement work. But if the franchise's most resourceful human strategist ranks 10th, wait until you learn about the only other being in the Invincible universe who also cannot be killed. The Immortal. He has died. Repeatedly. He has been beheaded, destroyed, dismembered, and atomically scattered, and each time his biology has reconstructed him from whatever remained because the franchise established early that his specific power is the inability to stay dead regardless of what is done to him. The theoretical matchup between the Immortal and Volcanikka is the franchise's most interesting conceptual fight precisely because it removes the variable that makes Volcanikka so dangerous against every other opponent, the guarantee that she will outlast whoever she is fighting. Against the Immortal, that guarantee disappears. The Invincible Comics Wiki and the Screen Rant Comics Analysis both document his established power tier as one of Earth's most physically formidable sustained combatants, not the fastest, not the strongest in raw output, but durable in a way that is categorically different from conventional superhuman durability. He does not need to kill Volcanikka quickly. He needs to outlast her regeneration while delivering damage at a consistent rate, which is a fight dynamic that his specific biology is built for, and which most other fighters cannot access because they will tire, sustain cumulative damage, or be killed before the attrition model can operate. The specific question his matchup raises is whether his damage delivery rate could exceed her magma regeneration rate over sustained combat, and whether his biology, unlike conventional fighters, could survive the environmental conditions of a hell-based engagement long enough for that rate to matter. But if the Immortal, who could outlast her regeneration through sheer biological stubbornness, ranks 9th, wait until you learn about the man who could simply remove the arena she needs. Angstrom Levy. His power is the most specifically effective theoretical counter to Volcanikka's immortality of any character on this list, not because he can fight her, but because he does not need to. The Invincible Comics Wiki documents Angstrom Levy's ability as the formation of multiversal portals to any location across parallel dimensions and across physical space, a capability the franchise deployed as a threat multiplier when he sent 20 alternate versions of Invincible across Mark's reality simultaneously. Against Volcanikka, this ability addresses the specific mechanism of her immortality rather than her combat capability. The Amazon Invincible Fandom Wiki and the TV Tropes Herm recap both document the critical detail about her regeneration. The reason she is functionally unkillable inside the Underrealm is that she is living magma in an environment with a practically limitless supply of magma. Her regeneration is not internal. It draws on the environmental resource surrounding her. Remove the environment, remove the resource, remove the regeneration. A portal to the void of interstellar space, to the Arctic Ocean floor, to any environment with no accessible magma and temperatures approaching absolute zero, would place Volcanikka in conditions where her lava composition cannot maintain structural integrity and where no regenerative resource exists to replace what is lost. Does not need to overpower her. He needs to open a door, push her through it, and close it behind her. But if the portal maker, who could theoretically strand her somewhere without magma, ranks 8th, wait until you learn about the alien bred to kill the unkillable. Alan the alien. His entire biological existence is the result of a deliberate breeding program designed to produce a single specific outcome, a being capable of defeating a Viltrumite in direct combat. The Invincible Comics Wiki documents the Unipan Coalition's program. After the Viltrumites near eradicated Alan's species, his people engineered a lineage of fighters, each generation stronger than the last, until Alan emerged as the first product of that program capable of genuinely threatening a Viltrumite in a straight fight. His power tier escalated further when the Scourge virus infection he survived left him with dramatically enhanced physical capability, a documented post-infection amplification that places him above his already Viltrumite tier baseline. The franchise's established power scaling puts him in a category where the characters he can genuinely threaten include some of the strongest beings in the known universe. Against Volcanikka, the relevant calculation is whether his damage output, engineered over generations specifically to overwhelm beings who should be physically superior, can exceed her magma regeneration rate. The theoretical answer is yes, with the same caveat that applies to every physical combatant on this list. The fight needs to take place somewhere that limits her access to the magma supply she draws on for regeneration. The Alan in deep space against a Volcanikka removed from Hell's thermal resources is a fight where the engineered apex predator's damage delivery has nowhere to go except through her. But if the alien bred across generations specifically to kill what shouldn't be killable ranks 7th, wait until you learn about the Viltrumite who doesn't know the meaning of restraint. Conquest. The TV tropes Herm recap documents what made Invincible's repeated decapitation the closest anyone has come to stopping Volcanikka. Not the specific technique, but the rate and relentlessness of delivery. Mark decapitated her multiple times in rapid succession until the regeneration cycle was exhausted enough to force retreat. The problem was that Mark was operating with moral restraint. He was trying not to cause unnecessary harm, pulling back between strikes, was giving her recovery intervals that a less considered fighter would not have provided. Does not do this. The Invincible Comics Wiki and the villain fandom documentation both establish Conquest as the franchise's designated avatar of pure destructive pressure. A Viltrumite whose specific combat philosophy is the elimination of all restraint in service of maximum damage output, applied continuously until the opponent stops functioning. Every fight he appears in is built around this quality. He does not pause. He does not assess. He increases damage rate until the thing he is hitting cannot absorb it anymore. Against Volcanikka, this matters specifically because her immortality is a regeneration-based system rather than an invulnerability-based one. It can theoretically be overwhelmed if the damage rate exceeds the repair rate. Is the fighter in the franchise most specifically built to maximize damage rate without the moral ceiling that limited Mark's effectiveness? But if the Viltrumite who treats restraint as a character flaw ranks 6th, wait until you learn about his predecessor at full capacity. Omni-Man. The distinction between Mark's performance against Volcanikka and what Nolan Grayson would produce in the same fight is the distinction between a son who is fighting to protect people and a father who spent centuries learning that the most efficient resolution to any threat is the one that ends it fastest. The Invincible Comics Wiki and the writeups.org profile both document Nolan's power tier as categorically above Mark's at the point in the series where his son fought Volcanikka, a gap that closes across the story but has not closed entirely at the Season 4 timeline. He is faster, stronger, and carries decades of additional combat experience in environments where the cost of excessive restraint was his own death. More relevantly, the Hell environment that limited Mark's effectiveness, an unfamiliar dimension, populated with beings he was reluctant to harm, requiring moral navigation simultaneously with physical combat, would not limit Nolan in the same way. Nolan's moral framework has been tested, revised, and ultimately reoriented toward protecting Mark on humanity, but it has never included the specific reluctance to apply maximum force that made Mark's decapitation sequence less efficient than it could have been. A Nolan Grayson fighting Volcanikka with the specific objective of preventing her from reaching the surface and threatening his son would be operating at a damage delivery rate and sustained pressure that Mark's version of the same fight did not approach. The environmental caveat remains: limiting her access to the surrounding magma increases the probability of permanent defeat. But if Omni-Man at full commitment ranks 5th, wait until you learn about the one fighter whose specific gift is finding the weakness in anything. Battle Beast. He fought Thragg for days. This specific endurance feat is the franchise's most important benchmark for assessing Battle Beast's relevance to the Volcanikka problem, because it documents something more significant than physical power. It documents the duration and quality of his combat intelligence against the strongest being in the series. The Villains fandom and the Thragg versus battles wiki both confirm that the Battle Beast engagement lasted multiple days before Thragg finally won, and that Battle Beast's specific ability, described as a combat genius, is the instinct and analytical capability to identify the exploitable weakness in any opponent's fighting style and biological architecture. Against Volcanikka, this matters more than against almost any other opponent in the franchise, because her immortality is not actually immunity to all damage. It is a specific biological system with a specific resource requirement, and systems with resource requirements have failure conditions. As combat intelligence is specifically optimized for the kind of extended engagement that identifies those failure conditions. He would not approach the fight as Mark did, as a series of decapitations hoping the rate exceeds regeneration. He would approach it as a research problem with fatal conclusions, spending the time the fight requires to understand what specific intervention stops her biology from functioning, given days which his endurance against Thragg confirms he can sustain. The probability of identifying and exploiting that intervention is higher for Battle Beast than for any purely physical combatant on this list. But if the combat genius built for the extended fight ranks 4th, wait until you learn about the woman who does not need to fight her at all. Adam Eve. Her standard state power is matter manipulation at the molecular level, the ability to restructure the physical composition of any non-living material by rewriting its atomic arrangement. The Invincible Comics wiki documents this as her primary capability, alongside the neural block that prevents her from applying it to living organisms in standard operation. Volcanikka presents a specific challenge to that limitation. She is a magma elemental whose body is composed of rock and molten lava, inorganic material, geological rather than biological, existing at the intersection of living being and physical substance in a way that the franchise has never precisely categorized. If Volcanikka's composition registers to Eve's matter manipulation as inorganic rather than living, as lava and rock rather than a biological organism, the neural block may not engage, which means Eve could theoretically restructure her magma composition at the molecular level directly. Cooling the magma. Solidifying the structure. Replacing the thermal energy that maintains her fluid state with a molecular arrangement that cannot maintain it. Her regeneration draws on the magma surrounding her, but magma that has been molecularly restructured into a stable solid form cannot flow back into the Volcanikka-shaped gap it left. Standard state Eve, without accessing her unleashed capability, could theoretically approach Volcanikka as a material science problem rather than a combat problem. Yeah, but if the matter manipulator who could restructure her composition at the molecular level in standard operation ranks 3rd, wait until you learn about the two beings who could simply prevent her from existing entirely. Thragg. The strongest Viltrumite in the history of the species, bred, trained, and 2,000-year refined to deliver damage at a rate that no other being in the franchise has demonstrated the ability to absorb without consequence. The VS Battles. Thragg profile and the Villains fandom wiki both document his specific combat advantage over every other physical fighter in the series. His damage output operates at a speed and force that his opponents cannot sustain regardless of their individual durability. Volcanikka's immortality is regeneration-based. She repairs damage faster than it accumulates against every opponent the franchise has placed in front of her. Against Thragg, the question is whether she can repair damage faster than the strongest Viltrumite in the species' entire recorded history can deliver it, in an environment where his massively FTL plus speed means the interval between strikes is measured in fractions of seconds. The mathematical relationship between his damage delivery rate and her regeneration rate is the fight's central variable, and nothing in the franchise's established lore suggests her regeneration operates at speeds that account for Thragg-level input. The environmental consideration that applied to every other physical combatant on this list applies equally here. Limiting her magma supply reduces the regeneration ceiling, but Thragg's damage output may be sufficient to exceed it even without that advantage. He is fought in the sun's corona. Volcanikka's thermal environment is not the limiting factor for him, but if the strongest being in the series ranks second, wait until you learn about the woman who would not need him to be. Adam Eve Unleashed. Twice in the franchise's history, a trauma severe enough to break the neural block has produced a version of Adam Eve operating at what the Invincible Comics wiki describes as nigh-omnipotent molecular manipulation, a state where the limitation preventing her from restructuring living organisms no longer applies, and the scope of her matter control expands to encompass everything in her environment simultaneously. The first documented instance produced the regeneration of Mark's entire body from near death. The second allowed interventions at a scale the franchise framed as approaching total environmental control. In this state, the question of whether Volcanikka counts as living or inorganic becomes irrelevant. The block that prevents Eve from restructuring living organisms is removed, meaning every category of material is available for manipulation. The specific application against Volcanikka would not need to be combat. It would not need to involve physical contact, endurance, or the sustained damage versus regeneration calculation that defines every other approach on this list. Eve at full power could simply decide what Volcanikka's composition is and restructure it accordingly, not killing her in the conventional sense, but unmaking the specific physical arrangement that constitutes her existence and replacing it with something that is not Volcanikka anymore. She restructured an entire biological entity back from the threshold of death. The inverse application, restructuring something that should not die into something that no longer requires addressing, is the same capability operating in the opposite direction. Volcanikka told Invincible she would never truly go away. She has not met Eve at full power.